The call came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was reviewing acquisition reports for my latest property development when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hello, this is Victoria Manning from Elegant Events Planning," the voice said, dripping with practiced sweetness. "I'm calling regarding the Henderson wedding this Saturday." Henderson. My maiden name. The name I'd left behind 3 years ago when I'd finally had enough of my family's constant dismissal and manipulation. "Yes," I said simply, setting down my pen. "Well, I have some unfortunate news," Victoria continued, her tone shifting to something more dismissive. "You're uninvited from the wedding. Family's orders. I'm sorry, but there's been a change in the guest list." I leaned back in my leather chair, looking out at the Chicago skyline from my corner office on the 47th floor. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the construction crews working on the new Anderson Plaza, another addition to my real estate empire that my family knew nothing about. "I understand," I said calmly. "Great. Well, that makes this easier than I thought." Victoria's relief was palpable. "I was told you might make a scene or something. Anyway, have a nice day." The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a moment, then laughed. A genuine, surprised laugh that echoed through my empty office. They'd actually done it. My own sister had uninvited me from her wedding, the wedding that was being held at Grandview Manor, the premier wedding venue in the city. The venue I'd purchased 6 months ago through my holding company, Morrison Properties LLC. My assistant David knocked on the door. "Ms. Anderson? Your 3 p.m. is here." "Cancel it," I said, still smiling. "And get me the file on the Grandview Manor acquisition." 20 minutes later my phone rang again. Same number. "Hello. Ms. Anderson." Victoria's voice was completely different now, high-pitched, panicked. "I am so sorry for the confusion earlier. I had no idea. We didn't know that you own the entire venue. Please tell me we can work this out. The wedding is tomorrow." I let the silence stretch for a moment, listening to her rapid breathing. "Victoria," I said finally, "I think we need to talk." Yes, absolutely. Can you come in? Or I can come to you. Whatever works best for you, Ms. Anderson. You're the owner, after all, and I am just mortified about this misunderstanding. I'll be there in an hour." Grandview Manor sat on 12 pristine acres in Highland Park, about 30 minutes north of downtown Chicago. I'd fallen in love with the property the moment I saw it, a restored 1920s mansion with manicured gardens, a ballroom that could accommodate 300 guests, and enough smaller rooms for intimate ceremonies. It was the kind of place where Chicago's elite held their most important celebrations. I'd bought it not for sentiment but because it was a smart investment. The venue was booked solid for 2 years in advance, with couples paying anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000 for their dream wedding. What I hadn't expected was for my sister Emma to book it for her wedding to Bradley Ashworth III, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune and, according to my mother, finally someone worthy of the Henderson name. Victoria was waiting for me in the main lobby, practically wringing her hands. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 28, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Ms. Anderson," she rushed forward as soon as she saw me. "I cannot apologize enough for what happened on the phone. I had absolutely no idea that you were the owner. Your sister simply told me that you weren't welcome and asked me to handle the situation." "What exactly did Emma tell you about me?" I asked, following her into the main office. Victoria looked uncomfortable. "She said you were the family disappointment, that you dropped out of the family business to pursue some failed startup, and that your presence would be embarrassing for their guests." I almost laughed again. Failed startup. If only they knew. 3 years ago, I had worked for Henderson Financial Group, my father's investment firm. I'd been the dutiful daughter, putting in 60-hour weeks, generating millions in revenue, all while being treated like an intern by my father and older brother Marcus. Every idea I pitched was dismissed, every success I achieved was attributed to someone else, and every mistake, no matter how small, was magnified and used as evidence that I didn't have what it took to be a real Henderson. The breaking point came when I discovered that Marcus had been taking credit for my work on a major municipal bond deal, a deal that earned the firm $12 million in fees. When I confronted my father about it, he told me I was being emotional and should focus on learning from my brother instead of competing with him. So I left. I took my savings, my contacts, and my ideas, and I disappeared from their world entirely. What they didn't know was that I'd been building something much bigger than they could have imagined. Victoria, I said, settling into the chair across from her desk, tell me about tomorrow's wedding. He pulled out a thick folder. It's going to be beautiful. 250 guests, ceremony in the Rose Garden at 4 p.m., cocktail hour on the terrace, reception in the grand ballroom. The Ashworth family spared no expense. This is easily a $180,000 event. And Emma specifically said I wasn't welcome? She was very clear about it. She said, and I quote, "Under no circumstances is my sister to be allowed anywhere near this wedding. She's already embarrassed our family enough, and I won't have her ruining the most important day of my life." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly. More like clarity. Victoria, I need you to call Emma. Tell her there's been a problem with the venue for tomorrow. A problem? But everything's perfect. The flowers are being delivered in the morning, the catering staff is confirmed, the band has already done their sound check. Tell her the venue has been double booked, and we need to discuss alternative arrangements. Victoria's face went pale. But that's not true. And even if it were, we couldn't possibly find another venue of this caliber with less than 24 hours notice. Not for a wedding of this size and importance. I know, I said simply. It took Victoria a moment to understand what I was really asking her to do. When it hit her, her eyes widened. Miss Anderson, you can't be serious. Make the call. My phone rang 15 minutes later. What do you mean the venue is double booked? Emma's voice was shrill enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Emma, I said calmly. Don't you Emma to me. This is a disaster. Do you have any idea how much money we've spent on this wedding? The flowers alone cost $15,000. And now you're telling me some incompetent wedding planner screwed up the booking. Actually, there wasn't a mistake in the booking. Silence. What do you mean? I mean Victoria called you because I asked her to. You see Emma, I own Grandview Manor. I have for the past 6 months. More silence. That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. You're barely scraping by with your little computer business. Little computer business. If she only knew. Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You have 2 choices. You can apologize for uninviting me from your wedding, your sister, and we can pretend this conversation never happened. Or you can find somewhere else to get married tomorrow. You're bluffing. This is some kind of sick joke. You probably called pretending to be the venue owner just to mess with me. Check the property records, Emma. Morrison Properties LLC purchased Grandview Manor in April. Morrison Properties is my company. I could hear her breathing heavily. Even if that's true, which I don't believe, you wouldn't actually cancel my wedding. You're not that cruel. You're right, I said. I'm not cruel. I'm just not interested in hosting events for people who consider me an embarrassment to the family. This is insane. I'm calling Dad. He'll straighten this out. Please do. The line went dead. My phone rang again 20 minutes later. This time it was my father. Sophia, what the hell is going on? Emma is hysterical, claiming you own some wedding venue and you're trying to sabotage her wedding. Hi Dad. How have you been? It's been almost 2 years since we last spoke. Don't play games with me. Emma says you're threatening to cancel her wedding venue. I'm not threatening anything. I simply informed her that as the owner of Grandview Manor, I have the right to choose which events I host. Silence. Then, you own Grandview Manor. Among other properties, yes. How? You left Henderson Financial with nothing. You had maybe $50,000 in savings. I had more than savings, Dad. I had 3 years' worth of contacts from working at your firm. I had a deep understanding of Chicago's real estate market from all those municipal bond deals I worked on, the ones Marcus took credit for. And I had something else you never bothered to notice. I had talent. This is ridiculous. Even if you somehow managed to buy one property, Grandview Manor is worth at least $8 million. There's no way you could afford something like that. Dad, do you remember the Millennium Development Project? The one where the city needed $200 million in financing for the new cultural district. Of course, that was Marcus's deal. One of his biggest successes. No, Dad. That was my deal. I spent 8 months building the relationship with the city planning committee. I structured the entire financing package. I negotiated the terms with the contractors. Marcus just signed the papers and took the photo for the company newsletter. That's not. And the Patterson Industrial acquisition? The one that earned Henderson Financial a $15 million fee? That was mine too. I identified the company as an acquisition target. I built the financial models. I pitched the deal to Patterson's board. Marcus presented my work and got a promotion. I could hear him breathing heavily. For 3 years I built your business while you and Marcus took all the credit and told me I wasn't smart enough, wasn't aggressive enough, wasn't a real Henderson. So I left and I started over. The difference is, this time I kept the credit for my own work. Even so, one property doesn't make you some kind of real estate mogul. I pulled out the folder David had prepared for me earlier. Morrison Properties currently owns 17 commercial properties in the Chicago metropolitan area, with a combined value of approximately $180 million. We also hold majority stakes in 3 development projects that will break ground next year. And we're currently in negotiations to acquire the Henderson Financial Group building. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Dad, you're trying to buy our building? I already made the offer. Your landlord seemed very interested. Something about Henderson Financial being 3 months behind on rent. Another long silence. What do you want, Sophia? I want my family to treat me with the same respect they show strangers on the street. I want Emma to apologize for uninviting me from her wedding. And I want all of you to stop pretending I'm some kind of failure just because I chose to succeed outside of your little kingdom. And if Emma apologizes, if we acknowledge that we misjudged your situation, then she has a beautiful wedding at one of the most exclusive venues in Chicago, and we all move forward like a real family. And if she doesn't? I looked out the window of the venue office, where a team of gardeners was putting the finishing touches on the rose garden where Emma's ceremony was supposed to take place tomorrow. Then she spends the next 18 hours trying to find somewhere else to get married. This is blackmail. No, Dad. This is business. Something I learned from you, actually. He hung up without saying goodbye. An hour later, Emma called back. Her voice was quieter now, less hysterical. Sophia. Yes. Mom says I should apologize. What do you think? A long pause. I think I don't understand how this happened. How you went from being our family's disappointment to owning half of Chicago without any of us knowing about it. I went from being your scapegoat to being successful. There's a difference. We really hurt you, didn't we? It was the first time any of my family members had acknowledged that their treatment of me might have been unfair. I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot of resentment I'd been carrying for 3 years. Yeah, Emma. You really did. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for uninviting you, and I'm sorry for calling your business a failure, and I'm sorry for all of it. I don't know how to fix this, but I want you at my wedding. If you'll still come. I thought about it. I could make her grovel more. I could demand apologies from the rest of the family, make them acknowledge every slight, every dismissive comment, every time they'd made me feel small and worthless. But Emma was still my sister. And underneath all the entitlement and casual cruelty, I could hear something I hadn't heard in years. Genuine remorse. I'll be there, I said finally. Really? Really? But Emma? Yeah. This conversation never happened. As far as anyone knows tomorrow, I'm just another wedding guest who happens to appreciate fine venues. I understand. And Sophia? Thank you. The next day I arrived at Grandview Manor at 3:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the ceremony. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a navy blue dress that was elegant but not attention-grabbing, paired with understated jewelry. I wanted to blend in, not make a statement. But as I walked through the main entrance, I couldn't help but feel a quiet pride looking around at the venue I'd restored and transformed into Chicago's premier wedding destination. Emma looked beautiful in her wedding dress, a custom creation that probably cost more than most people's cars. When she saw me, she broke away from her bridesmaids and hurried over. Sophia. You came. Of course I came. You look stunning, Emma. Thank you. And thank you for everything. The venue is absolutely perfect. I'm glad you're happy with it. She hesitated for a moment, then leaned in closer. Can I ask you something? Are you really as successful as you told Dad yesterday? I smiled. More successful, actually. But let's talk about that another time. Today is about you and Bradley. The ceremony was beautiful. Emma and Bradley exchanged vows in the rose garden under a perfect September sky, surrounded by family and friends who had no idea that the venue owner was sitting in the third row, watching her sister marry into one of Chicago's most prominent families. During the cocktail hour, I found myself in conversations with several of the guests, many of whom, it turned out, were potential clients for my development projects. By the time dinner was served, I had 3 new business cards and 2 meeting requests for the following week. My father approached me during the reception, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. "Sophia. Dad. Can we talk?" We walked out to the terrace, away from the noise of the party. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "For what specifically?" He winced at the directness of the question. "For underestimating you. For taking you for granted. For letting Marcus take credit for your work. And for making you feel like you had to choose between being part of this family and being successful." I studied his face. He looked older than I remembered, more tired, more worn down. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Did you know Marcus was taking credit for my deals?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I suspected. But you didn't stop it." I told myself it was character building. That you needed to learn to fight for recognition. What you really thought was that Marcus deserved the credit more than I did because he was your son and heir, and I was just the daughter who would eventually get married and leave the business anyway. He didn't deny it. "I'm proud of what you've built, Sophia. Truly. I just wish." "What?" "I wish we could have built it together." I looked back through the windows at the reception, where Emma was dancing with her new husband while their friends and family celebrated around them. It was the kind of life I'd once thought I wanted, the approval of my family, a place in their world, their recognition of my worth. "Dad, I want to show you something." I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, showing him the account balances for Morrison Properties and its subsidiaries. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the numbers. "Jesus Christ, Sophia. You're worth more than Henderson Financial Group. More than the Ashworth family. More than anyone at this wedding, actually." "How?" "The same way you built your business, Dad. One deal at a time. Except I did it without anyone's help and without anyone taking credit for my work." We stood in silence for a while, listening to the music and laughter drifting out from the ballroom. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "Now Emma has a beautiful wedding at a venue she'll always remember. And maybe if you're interested we can have a conversation about what it might look like for Henderson Financial to work with Morrison Properties on some upcoming projects. You'd be willing to do business with us?" "After everything. I'd be willing to do business with you, Dad. But as equals. Not as the daughter who needs her father's approval, but as the CEO of a company that might benefit from a partnership." He nodded slowly. "I think I'd like that." "Good. Have your people call my people on Monday." He laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. "When did you become so ruthless?" "I learned from the best." As the evening wound down and the guests began to leave, I found myself saying goodbye to Emma one last time. "Thank you," she said, hugging me tightly. "For everything. For the venue, for coming, for not letting me ruin this completely." "You didn't ruin anything, Emma. You just learned something important about making assumptions about people." "What's that?" "That you never really know what someone is capable of until you give them a reason to show you." I drove home to my penthouse apartment, thinking about the events of the last 24 hours. My family had spent 3 years assuming I was a failure, that I'd thrown away my potential and embarrassed the Henderson name by leaving their world behind. What they didn't understand was that I hadn't thrown anything away. I'd invested it all, my talent, my knowledge, my connections, and yes, my anger, into building something bigger and better than anything they'd ever dreamed of. The wedding was just the beginning. On Monday, I had meetings with 3 major developers, a city planning session for the new cultural district expansion, and a conference call with investors about the Morrison Properties IPO we were planning for next year. But tonight I was just Sophia Anderson, the woman who owned the most beautiful wedding venue in Chicago and who had finally gotten the apology she deserved from the family who had never believed in her. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's also the beginning of something better than revenge. Reconciliation built on respect instead of assumption, love tempered with understanding, and a family that finally sees you for who you really are instead of who they thought you should be. As I fell asleep that night, I smiled thinking about Victoria's panicked phone call earlier that day. She had no idea that her mistake had given me something I didn't even know I wanted. The chance to show my family that the daughter they'd dismissed as a failure had become the woman who could make or break their most important moments with a single phone call. Tomorrow we would all wake up in a different world, one where Sophia Henderson was no longer the family disappointment, but Sophia Anderson, CEO of Morrison Properties and the woman who had turned her family's dismissal into the motivation to build an empire they never saw coming. And honestly, that felt better than any wedding I'd ever attended.